Shall we begin?
To summarize up to this point, Hellraiser Revelations came and went in 2011 and turned out pretty awful. But from Dimension's point of view, it had served its purpose, as the rights had successfully been extended, leaving them more time to get a bigger budget remake off the ground. They spent that time rejecting every pitch and take that came their way, including yours, Gary, which we'll get back to. So let's fast forward to 2015. When the rights reversion deadline started looming in the horizon once more.
I got the call from Joel Swasson again, saying the rights are coming up again for Hellraiser. I know Revelations was a bitter pill for you. Would you like to write and direct it? And I was like, abso-fucking-lutely. And if they'd have told me they had $100,000 this time, if they'd just told me they had $50 and a HD camera, I would have said yes, because I'm a fucking idiot. You know what I mean? I'm a fan. I'm just desperate for a chance to do it. I'm sorry, but I'll stand up in front of any convention of fans and say, you all want to say, oh, I would never do, why would you do this, why would you do that? Let me ask you all now, how many wannabe filmmakers in the audience? Hold your hand up. Right, if you get a phone call tomorrow from Dimension Film saying, we'd like to make a horror film, we've got $250,000 budget, would you like to write and direct it? How many of you are going to go, well, thanks for the offer, but really I'm waiting for something better to come along? It's like, it's a no fucking brainer. So I was like, yeah. Before I even said how much money have we got, how long, what time, I was like, yeah, I'm in. Because I'm fucking stupid. Because I love Hellraiser. I love it. But at the same time, don't get me wrong, I'm not arrogant enough to think, oh, well, let me do it and I'll knock it out of the park. There's part of me thinking, oh, great, I'm about to stick my fucking head in the lion's mouth here. The last one was a debacle, which I wrote. I'm about to stick my head in the lion's mouth. And as any lion tamer will tell you, who does his circus act every night where he puts his head in the lion's mouth, if you don't do that thinking, well, tonight might be the night that Leo fucking bites my head off, you're an idiot. Before anyone had a chance to talk me out of it, or my wife had a chance to say, see good sense, I was like, yeah, I'm in. Like a fucking dolt. And I was like, fantastic. Oh, you have how much? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, look, we have a little bit more money than last time, and we're not in so much of a rush. Would you like to do it? And I said, absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. I'm down. Count me in. So it wasn't like we need to make it right away. They were like, okay, so fantastic. We'd love you to do it. So do you have any script ideas? Yeah, I do. Absolutely. A couple of years ago, I'd come up with a synopsis for a story called Hellraiser Judgment, which after Revelations I'd written. And I was like, well, this won't get made. And I'd written a what if kind of story. I'd kind of said, oh, well, fuck it. If I'm going to write a story, I'll write a story for me. So I came with the idea of this story, and the story was that the film would start with a house, and we'd see this weird house, it's in a house in any street, in any town, in any place in America. And it's just a house that looks kind of decrepit and a bit run down. And we see a Christian salesman, someone spreading the word of God going to a house. And he goes to this house, and he knocks on the door, and he says, can I share the word of God's good grace with you? And this character says, yes, please, come on in. And the guy goes inside, and we hear a struggle, and then the next thing we know, a blindfold's being pulled off him, and he meets the Auditor. And we start the process of the audit, which is what you see in Judgment as it is now. So that goes on. That's the first 15 minutes of the film was going to be this weird, bizarre audit with these characters. The Auditor, the Assessor, the Jury, the Surgeon, the Butcher, and we were going to meet the Seamstress and the Bone Collectors as well. So you would have this weird 15, 20-minute sequence. Everyone would go, what the fuck was that? No Pinhead, nothing. Then, 2 days later, a cop pulls up outside the house, knocks on the door and says, excuse me, I'm looking for this guy in the neighborhood. He disappeared 2 days ago. Can you tell me anything about him? Absolutely. Come on in. He goes inside, and now he wakes up in the chair facing the Auditor. And hopefully the audience go, fuck me, really? Are we going to do this again? You're going to do this like it wasn't a nightmare the first time. I wanted to shoot something so visceral and horrible, more intense than what's in Judgment right now, but have this bizarre thing happen and have the audience go, oh my God, we're going to do this again. I don't know if I can stomach it. Have him interviewed, have him processed, but then when the pages are read, it chokes the assessor like it does in the movie now. And the Auditor says something's wrong, and he goes out and he goes to Pinhead. And Pinhead says, what's going on? And he says, I need you to help me. Something's wrong. The process isn't working. And then Pinhead literally goes in with Chatterer and the female Cenobite, and we do kind of like almost like what you see with Kirsty or Frank, we want to hear it from your lips, smoke blowing and everything else. And Pinhead says, why did his words choke it? And it becomes kind of this kind of like courtroom where Pinhead starts to pull back the pages and look at the pages and says, what's this instance here? Tell me about this. And we do flashbacks, and it's crime scenes of where the policeman is working at and things that are happening and all this kind of stuff. And we don't fill in all the gaps, but we get to see what's going on. And basically, we start to think that this policeman is innocent. He's a real innocent. He's a pure soul. And all of a sudden, an angel comes in and has this kind of standoff with Pinhead. And Pinhead's like, why are you here? And she's like, you have to release him. You have to let him go back. And he's like, you can't come down here. This is not to involve. This is our domain. We run this. This is our deal. Get the fuck out. And she's like, you need to release him. And there's much kind of toing and froing. And eventually the guy is released and he's let loose from the house, and he goes back to the police station, and he comes back with the armed forces, with the police, and there's no one there. The house is still there, but it's empty. And then you see Pinhead and the Auditor going over the stuff. And what you discover is that he's not actually innocent, and there's this kind of standoff with the angel again, where he's not innocent, that all the crimes he committed, he's guilty, he's done all these terrible things, he's kind of like a bad lieutenant kind of cop, and Pinhead's a bit ticked off, to say the least, that they let him go. So the cop goes home that night, kind of gets into bed and kind of chills out for the night, wakes up, and the room lights up, and Pinhead and the Cenobites are in there, and they're like, there was a clerical error, you are guilty. And then the audience gets to see how he did all these terrible, terrible things. And then the last 15 minutes was going to be Pinhead going to town on this guy doing what the Cenobites do best. So that was what I had for Hellraiser Judgment. And when I pitched it around and showed people, Dimension were like, we're not making a Hellraiser film. No one was interested. They wouldn't even take a meeting. This was after Revelations. They were like, they're not making a Hellraiser, and if they do, it's probably going to be a big budget remake. They were talking about Pascal Laugier and the guys who did Martyrs and all this kind of stuff. So I just kind of sat on it. And then Mike Regan, who works for me, he said, that Judgment story is really kind of cool. Does it need to have Pinhead in it? And I was like, well, I guess not. So it was like the opposite version of what happened with Deader and Hellseeker and all that. I ended up taking all of that. And at that time, everyone was doing Kickstarter films, projects. Alec Gillis was doing Harbinger Down, and everyone was making films on Kickstarter. And I didn't really understand the Kickstarter model. I didn't know anything about it. Stephen Norrington was like, you should do a film on Kickstarter. You know how to make films really cheaply. You should do a film, do a werewolf movie or a horror movie. And Mike Regan was like, that Judgment idea is kind of cool. Why don't you just take out the Hellraiser stuff? So I did that. I kind of took all the Hellraiser stuff out, and then I actually went around a couple of production companies. I met with producers, I met with the Fortress guys and a couple of people, and said, I've got this idea for a film. And they would go, okay, pitch it, tell us this. And I would tell it to them, and as I would start to explain about the assessor eating the pages and vomiting, and the girls drinking the vomit, because they didn't just put their hands in it in the original, they drank the vomit, and then these old ladies licking people, I would literally watch producers' eyes glaze over. They would go, what? Old ladies licking people and spitting in people's mouths, and girls eating vomit? And they go, no. Do you not have a script of a guy with a chainsaw or something, or some teenagers having sex in a cabin somewhere? And I go, no, I want to make this. And they go, yeah, it's not really what we want to do. And no one wanted to buy it. They would just get freaked out. I would literally watch them glaze over, or their jaws drop as I was explaining it. So Norrington and my guys were like, you should do a Kickstarter. Do a Kickstarter, dude. So I was like, well, okay. So we put together I shot a scene, and we did some images. Again, this is my naivety here. But we put it on Kickstarter. I was like, $175,000, I guess. So I put it on, and a bunch of friends and people were like, this is great. And they were like, we're in. And they put like $5,000 in, and $2,000 and $7,000. And I think there was within 3 days, there was like $15,000 or something. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is awesome. Woohoo. I get to make a film. And then it kind of dried up, and I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I don't know if you guys have looked, but I don't do Facebook. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I don't do any social media at all. I have a website, and that's it. Because I fucking hate it. I can't stand it. I don't post pictures of me doing makeups every day or talking about what I had for breakfast. I really loathe social media. You can tell if you watch Judgment and Revelations, actually. So it started to stall or just didn't get any more money. And then people were like, oh, you need to open up all your contacts in your email and just email everybody you know. Everybody. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, email everybody, executives. No, I mean, I have a lot of people I know, obviously, from Mike DeLuca to, God, everybody, you know, to all the directors I've worked with, Rennie Harlin. And I was like, you want me to write to Rennie Harlin and ask him for like $1,000 for an executive producer credit on a Kickstarter movie? It felt really tacky. I just didn't like the idea of it. It felt, A, like it was a bit tacky, and B, like I was kind of saying to them, I don't have my own money, you know, like I'm poor. You know, I'm poor, help me. And it just felt really kind of seedy. And I said, I can't go to everybody I know, cap in hand, saying, I'll give you a T-shirt if you give me $25 or $50. So maybe I'm old-fashioned, I don't know, but it just didn't sit well with me. So I cancelled it. It didn't fail. It didn't get to the end and stop. I took it off. I just took it down. So that's what happened of Judgment. And there was no script. I'd never written a script. I lie in the Kickstarter campaign. I say a script was written, but the truth is I didn't. I got a synopsis, and my attitude was, well, if it gets funded, if we get the money, I'll write the script. Because there was no production window needed. I just needed to make it. So I didn't have a script. Cut to a couple of years later, if I think it is a couple of years later, phone rings, and it's Joel saying, do you want to do another Hellraiser? Do you have a story in mind? And I said, do I ever? I've got my Judgment story. So I wrote up the pitch, sent it to Dimension, and guess what they all said?
They politely declined.
They went, are you fucking crazy? Fucking girls drinking fucking vomit and fucking, you know, fat guys eating fucking pages, and what the fuck is this shit? You out of your mind? They're like, we don't want to do that. Just write a fucking, you know, Hellraiser script. And I was like, no, but I did that before and I got killed for it. I was like, this is what I want to make. I think it's visually different and weird and a bit trippy and a bit bizarre. And I said, I think that's what it needs. I said, I think we can't just rehash the same thing over and over again. I said, not so much Hellraiser influence, but Clive Barker influence. I said, let's just go down that path. And they were like, ooh. Okay, they said, go away and retweak it. So I went away and retweaked it again and tried to take out some of the weird shit and, you know, and pumped up the kind of cop thing. Because I thought, well, maybe they'll like a cop story, you know, like something like Seven. Because then studios, you know, if you're trying to pitch stories to, they like it when you can kind of, you know, give them a high concept, you know. It's like Seven with Hellraiser. And they're like, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds good. Not like it's like, you know, me saying it's like Blue Velvet meets a Razorhead. No studio wants to hear that, you know. They want to hear something that's, you know, got a snap to it. I rewrote it a little bit and sent it in, and they were like, nah, fucking awful. We don't want to do this. Can't you just lose all this weird fucking, the Auditor and the Assessor, and there's too many characters and it's weird, and why are they drinking vomit? I said, look, if we're going to swing for the fences, I said $400,000 budget, this is the movie to do it with, you know what I mean? Like, we can afford to be a bit risky, right? Come on, can't we? Who's going to care? You know, let me just go for it. And they were like, go away again. So I went away and I rewrote Judgment, the treatment, and at the same time, I banged out a treatment called Hellraiser Enter Darkness, which I still think is a really good title. And the story was about a psychiatric hospital and some interns, and they've been discovering these patients who have got this kind of shared experience, and we discover it's all about the limit configuration. And the doctor who runs the institute is basically collating all of these victims so that he can create his own grimoire and his information about Pinhead, because he wants to basically do it, you know, he wants to encounter the experiences of the Cenobites. And these interns, while they're collating the information from these victims, start to basically get the, you know, it seeps into them, and it's like that. I said, look, so here's the deal. Here's Judgment rewritten, and just to show willing, I've got another treatment for you called Hellraiser Enter Darkness. And they read it and they went, Enter Darkness is great! We love it! Perfect! Go away and write that one. It's fantastic. We love these young, hip, sexy doctors. It's like Flatliners meets Hellraiser, Gary. We love it! And I was like, oh, fuck. And the producer was like, why did you do that? Why did you shoot yourself in the foot? And I said, no, guys, I'm not going to write Enter Darkness. And they said, well, why did you send it to us? To show that I'm a team player. I said, but I am telling you right now, Judgment is the film it should be, and Judgment is the film I want to make, and Judgment is the film you should let me make. I've toed the line, let me make Judgment. So, in this beautiful conference call, they said, okay then, here's the deal, Gary. You go away and you write Hellraiser Judgment. and then you give us the script. And if we don't like it, you have to write Hellraiser Enter Darkness for free.
That was very charitable of them. To themselves.
And like a slut, and like an idiot, I said, okay. So I went away and I wrote Hellraiser Judgment. And about 2.5 weeks later, I sent them the first draft. And in an equally great conference call, I'm sitting there on the conference call, and it's like all these executives are turning up in the room. Hi, Gary, this is so-and-so. Hi, Gary, this is so-and-so. Hi, Gary, this is so-and-so. Hi, Gary, we're all here. I think it was Matt Signer at Dimension said the line that you always want to hear as a writer. He went, so we all read this Hellraiser Judgment. Pause. It's actually pretty good. We kind of dig it. We kind of see where you're going for it now. And you're like, yay! And then you get the next greatest thing, which is, obviously we want to do some rewrites. And obviously it needs a few changes, but we'll get into that later on. We'll send you some notes. And then over the next 3 days, you get pages of notes. Why are they doing this? Why is that doing that? We think this character should be like this. Why don't you do this? Why don't you lose that? No. Pages of notes. And then, as any writer will tell you in Hollywood, I'm sure, what you try and do is you take all of the notes that you really, really hate and push them to one side, and then think, well, if I can hit 70% or 50% of their notes, maybe they'll forget the other 30. So you try and do that. So you go back with your repolish, and they go, yeah, I said it. We really like this. You didn't do this thing though that we asked, and you're like, it just becomes this kind of to and fro game where you end up saying, yeah, I tried to do that, it didn't really work. And along the way, some things happen that are good ideas. I mean, Edgerton was their idea. Originally, it was just two brothers, and they were like bringing a female and another cop to kind of mix it up. And how about this and how about that? But I mean, never did I get the feeling that anybody was just along for the ride. I got some really good notes and some very considered notes and some very interesting notes. And I had two executive producers who were working with me who were very smart cookies and were very aware of the franchise. And a couple of times I tried to bullshit them, and they were like, "No, that's not actually true. In the fifth film they did that, or in Inferno they did that, or in Hellseeker." Because you do get a bit lazy at times. You're just trying to go, oh, fucking hell, I'm barely getting paid any money. Let me just write it.
I just say I gotta ask, just because I know our audience is definitely going to be interested. Roughly, how many suits do you think you got notes from? Especially considering you got pages, like a rough number. How many do you think were in?
4 or 5. 4 or 5.
Okay.
And then that whittled down to 2 or 3 with Matt doing overseeing. So that I think they would present their notes to him. But I had 2 main guys for a while. Once it got whittled down to 2, they were the 2, that's when it actually became more difficult, because you would get contradictory notes from each one, and it's very difficult in those situations to say, well, he told me to do this, because generally if you got them on the phone on their own, they would go, well, I don't care what he said, I'm telling you to do this. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and this is exactly what we kind of get into here at Midnight's Edge a lot of the times, is how many cooks are in the kitchen and how impossible it can be to make everybody happy and incorporate everybody's notes all the time, and just so they get an idea of how this works. And this is a smaller level film. Imagine something where they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars.
I mean, the one thing you have to understand is, anyone listening to this or watching movies, is that if you watch a film like The Mummy and give Alex Kurtzman a hard time, you need to back the fuck off. You cannot imagine the pressure that a guy like that's under.
Yeah, The Mummy was a case where seemingly neither the studio, star, nor director were making the same movie, and very little good ever comes with that. But in this case, though, were any of the notes you received actually beneficial?
Some of the notes they gave me were good ideas and led me to new places. And these people aren't stupid. They're not morons. They're clearly guys who've been to film school and know their stuff. Sometimes, when you're writing at 3 o'clock in the morning in your house, what seems like a great idea, when you read it back 2 days later, you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? And it will lead you to other places. And I'm not Tarantino. I'm not. I wish to God I was. But right. Sometimes they're good notes. Sometimes they're bad. Sometimes they're fucking stupid. And then it was like, okay, we're going to shoot it in the February. This was like over Christmas I was writing, and then by the January we were kind of ready to go into pre-production. And it was a low budget, and there were certain things. Don't get me wrong. There were certain things I knew I could write on the page, but I was confident enough to know or devious enough to know that, well, when I get on set, I don't need to actually have them say that. I can make calls in the director's chair, you know what I mean? Like, I can nod my head right now and say, oh, yeah, I've written this line. But just because I write a line doesn't mean I need to have somebody say it, you know? And then what are they going to do when they see the movie? That line's missing. Oh, yeah, well, you know, you can always do that as a director. It's like, yeah, of course I'll do that. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. But, you know, again, it's a game of give and take. So they approved the script. They were like, this is the shooting script. We go ahead and make it, you know. And then they came down and they said, so, Pinhead. Straight away, I was like, I want Doug Bradley to be Pinhead. And they were like, you do? And I was like, absolutely. He is the legacy. I said, he's my friend. I said, I want Doug to do it. Absolutely. And they were like, okay. And I spoke to Mike Leahy, my producer. And I said, how much money do you have for Pinhead? And he told me, and it was a decent amount of money. It was a lot more than we had on Revelations. You know, it was a reasonable amount of money, I think, for the 3 days that we needed him, probably. So I was like, I'll call him. And I was really excited. I was really, really excited. Can't stress that enough. Got on the phone. Ring. Hi, Gary. Hey, Doug, how are you? I'm good, how are you? I was like, Doug. I'm writing and directing the next Hellraiser film. We got it. It's going ahead. And I want you to be in it. And the first thing he said was, why are you helping those assholes make another piece of shit film? That was the first thing he said. And I went, because I'm directing it, Doug. I'm writing and directing it. It won't be a piece of shit. And that was the tone of the conversation. And I was like, well, Doug, we've got more money and a little bit more time, and I'm really happy with the script. And he's like, well, you were happy with the script before. And I was like, yeah, but I've had more, this is better, you know? And I said, honestly, you know, he's like, why? It's just going to be a pile of shit. It's just going to be a pile of shit. And sincerely, I was just like, I was expecting, hoping, looking forward to Judge Doug going, you know, hey, Doug, we're doing another Hellraiser movie. Oh, really? You know, but I'm writing and directing it. Oh, you are? Oh, well, then I'm in, dude. You know, like, yeah, right. You know? And I've got more money for you. Fantastic. When do we go? With you on board? You know, great, fantastic. I'm down. You know, like, it was my friend, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, yay, Doug. And he was just utterly popped my balloon. He was just like, oh, what a pile of shit. And I was like, okay. And he's like, well, send me the script. So he was literally very kind of like, well, look, send me the script, I'll read it, but I'm really not making any promises. It was that kind of attitude and that kind of complacence and that kind of delivering. And I got off the phone, and I think everyone looked at me and was like, yay! And I was like, well, wow, I feel like shit now. Like, he's utterly miserable. Just pissed all over my fucking dreams, you know? Like, he's really, really... I told him how much. I gave him an outline of the store, and he's like, yeah. Okay, well, send it to me and I'll read it, but I'm not promising anything. I sat down with Mike Leahy, the producer, who knows Doug and has worked with Doug. And he was very kind of like, very fatherly. He was like, are you okay? And I was like, no, not really. I said, I'm really, really upset. And he's like, well, what's wrong? And I said, look, I've got 15 days to shoot this film, limited resources. I said, I need everybody to just be on the fucking page and like ready to run, you know, and like want to do it for the right reasons and want to be involved and want to be excited by it. And he said, and Doug isn't like that. I said, that's not what I'm getting at all. I said, he just sounds utterly miserable. I said, and even if he agrees to do it, I said, I don't know if he's going to be into it anyway, you know what I mean? I said, no, I don't want to be on set, I said, and have this guy sitting up the corner saying, well, when we did Hellraiser Bloodline, it was way better and I had much more money, and, you know, and bitching and moaning and complaining. I said, I'm really upset. I said, I'm really genuinely kind of just hurt. I said, I'm hurt more than anything else. Well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, you know, he said, Dimension aren't particularly thrilled with Doug. He said, there's a lot of stuff online where he's just slammed Dimension and the executives and just said they're all idiots and stuff like that. He said, so they're not particularly enamored with him anyway. I said, and the last thing I want to do is if he reads the script and he says no, he's going to go online and tell everyone about it and tell them that he doesn't like it. And like he did with Revelations, when he turned it down for the money, but then went online and said it was because of the script, I don't want him to go out there and tell everyone the script and tell him it's because the script's shit. I said that's going to cloud it straight away if he goes online and tells everyone, oh, the script's a pile of shit, I've turned it down. And Mike said, well, NDA him. He said that way, at least if he turns it down, he can't discuss it, you know? And I was like, oh, okay. I said, well, that seems fair enough. I mean, I've signed 1 million NDAs in my life, so I was like, yeah, sure. Mike said, look, I've got an NDA from the film I just did. You know, he'd produced a film and he took the same NDA It's like a 3-page, pretty standard NDA. I mean, it's all legalese. I mean, I've signed them, and they all say the same thing, which is you won't talk about it, you won't talk about a negative thing, you won't explain story rights in anywhere you go, you know what I mean? You just won't talk about it. So we sent it to Doug. I said, Doug, I want to send you the script, but I'm going to send you an NDA first. We sent the NDA, and almost instantly I got an email back, a very kind of strong email saying, what the fuck is this? You know, what the fuck is this? I'm not signing an NDA. Very kind of like, how dare you? He didn't say how dare you, but he was very, very kind of like perturbed, you know. And maybe I understand why. I mean, he is Pinhead, and he is, you know, played it a million times, and maybe he thought he shouldn't have been sent an NDA. But I mean, I'm sure they sent Harrison Ford an NDA when he did Force Awakens. You know what I mean? I'm sure Harrison Ford wasn't like, how dare you? I'm Han Solo.
I'm going to act as Doug's advocate for a second here.
Please.
I've seen his comments on the matter, and my understanding is that he didn't so much mind signing an NDA as he minded signing that particular NDA.
Uh-huh.
His point is that all of the countless NDAs he signed over the course of his career have been fairly straightforward, generic one-page ordeals, and usually only 2/3 of that one page actually had writing. This NDA, however, was 3 pages long, filled with legalese, explicitly forbade him from talking about the movie in public toilets, on the phone, or whenever someone might eavesdrop, contained some ominous references to speaking out of turn at conventions, and which promised heavy financial repercussions if deemed to be violated. Was this a normal NDA, or one tailored for Doug Bradley?
Absolutely not.
Who, from Dimension's point of view, has spoken out of turn at conventions.
It wasn't even a Dimension thing. This was purely a Mike Leahy thing. It was purely Mike Leahy, the producer, who's the line producer on the film, and the producer who owns Neo Motion. He was like, you know, in order to make sure he doesn't talk about it, we'll send him an NDA. And it wasn't a specific NDA. It was literally, he took an NDA from the film he'd just done, scribbled out the name of the film, you know, or, you know, printed it out without the name of the film on it, and put the word Hellraiser in, and Hellraiser Judgment. That's all it was. It wasn't specifically made. It didn't come from the lawyers of Dimension. It was the NDA that was lying in his file from the one he'd had drawn up on the film he'd just done, which was a crime drama film. And that's all it was. It was just, I think it was just like, oh, we've got one. I've got one lying around. Like, you know, like the contracts I've done over the years when I've done effects contracts, they've just sent me contracts of other films with, you know, different effects people, and they've just changed the amounts and changed the name of the film because it's a cheap, easy way of doing it, I guess. So that's all it was. So, I mean, are we suggesting that had it been a one-page or 10-sentence NDA that said, please don't talk about it? But, I mean, if you're saying to someone you can't talk about the film at all, then, I mean, it negates anywhere, doesn't it? I suppose it, you know, doesn't need to be pointed out in bathrooms, toilets, and elevators. I think Doug must have just got into the minutiae of it, but, yeah, the reality is it was just, like I say, it wasn't a specific, specially made for him NDA. It was just an NDA. One that Mike Leahy had on his computer, and like he said, he wasn't, you know, he's like, oh, I've got an NDA on my computer. I'll send him this one. I'll send it to you, and you can send it on to him. That's all it was. And I've signed ones that are much longer. When I worked on The Wedding Ringer, which was after the Sony leak, the NDA on that was about 35 pages long.
Oh wow!
I gotta imagine the Scream one was huge too.
Yeah. But the one on Wedding Ringer was the longest I've ever done. The one after the Sony leak was insane.
Understandable, yeah.
Because it was right after the leak, and they were like, you can't even fucking carry images on your phone. If you do, you'll be, you know, we can arrest you. It was insane. So I didn't think it'd be any big deal. I didn't think anything of it. So I sent it to Doug, I mean, and then he was very kind of like indignant, upset. Like, I'm not signing, you know, I can't believe they want me to sign this NDA. You know, this is ridiculous. I can, you know, And I think I wrote back and said something like, Doug, it's just a fucking NDA, mate. You know, it's not a big deal. I think I wrote back and said, hey, I've signed NDAs worse than this. You know, if it was Star Wars, you'd sign it. If it was anything else. And then he wrote back, and he was even more perturbed now. And he wrote the phrase that caused all the problem, which is he wrote to me, you know, I don't know if I'm speaking verbatim now or approximately, but he wrote something akin to, I'm not going to make myself liable for $1 million, brackets, which I don't have, just to read a damn script. And then he wrote a bunch of other stuff as well, but that was what he'd written. And I kept that email, obviously. And I showed that to Mike Leahy, and he said, so what do you want to do now? And I said to Mike, I guess I'm looking for another Pinhead. And he said, you're cool with that? And I said, no. I said, I want Doug to play it. I said, secondly, it would be the right. I think I might have called Doug back and said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I said, "Don't you want to do something where you have something new to talk about? You know, won't this be cool?" And I don't think I did call him back. I think this is just me projecting, but I think I wrote back and said something like, "I can't believe it." I guess, and I think wrote to him and said, "I guess I'm looking for another Pinhead then." And that was it. We went quiet. And the next day, I spoke to Mike Leahy and said, "I guess we're looking for another Pinhead." And Dimension were like, "Fine, we don't care." They were like, "He said so much fucking shit about us. There's videos of him calling us assholes." They were like, "Great, fantastic. Let's find somebody good." And they were very much kind of like, "Then we'll find someone who can do the role, and we're behind you on that." So I mean, I said, "Right, let's get into casting and let's do it." After all the debacle came out, Doug was like, "Well, Gary didn't fight for me very hard, And I'm like, "I didn't fight for you." As soon as I called you about it, you were kind of mean to me. You were like, like, "Why are you helping these assholes?" When I asked you to sign an NDA, you were like, "I'm not going to sign it just to read a damn script." And it's like, that damn script was my script. It's my damn script that you were not going to read. And that was very offensive. It was like, "Oh, whatever I need to do to read your script, dude, I'm excited to read it." I mean, I was all frothy and giggly on the phone and excited and telling him plot points, and he was just utterly curmudgeonly and down on it. Utterly just. And I was like, "You know what, that's it." I said, "I'm not going to have him sitting on set being mean and miserable and I said, I want somebody who's going to be a cheerleader, someone who's going to be excited to do it, somebody who wants to turn up. Fuck it. We'll pay somebody a lot less money, and I'll use that money for the effects, and we'll get somebody who wants to be Pinhead. Somebody who's excited to be Pinhead, not somebody who's going to be, mean and miserable and upset and poo-poo the whole thing." So we moved on. So I mean, I called Chris Freihofer and the casting agent and said, "Right, let's start looking for a Pinhead." Now, let's just address one thing before we move on. It was suggested at one point, and no one's ever raised it, but when Doug was taken off the page, another actor was suggested, and he'd played Pinhead once before.
Not the guy from Hellraiser Revelations, surely.
No, me.
Oh, right.
I was just going to say that.
They were like, "Hey, well, you're English, and you've played it before. Why don't you do it?" And for the merest of nanoseconds, I was like, "Eh!" And then the voice inside my head went, Are you out of your fucking mind? If you don't think everyone hates you already, if you don't think the world is against you right now, if you really want to bring down the wrath of everybody upon the planet, you won't even think about it." And I was like, "Abso-fucking-lutely not." So, no way on earth am I playing Pinhead. Whether I do a great job or not, I will be hoisted up by everybody.
Yeah, that was probably a good decision.
Oh, it's not even a probably, Andre. It's without doubt the singular non-thing to consider for a heart. It's like, wow, you will just be setting yourself up for a public hanging. It's a horrible idea. Don't even think about it. And I was like, I think I looked at the person and said, "Are you fucking crazy? Are you fucking mental?" I was like, no. He'll have a field day with it. They'll have a field day with it. We'll never get out of the fucking paddock. I was like, no. So we started casting, and I saw lots of tape, and Paul Taylor had done a reading of The Auditor. And he was really sweet because he'd bought in like a Hellraiser cube and a little figure of Pinhead. And he said, "I know what this is for." Because at that point we were just calling it Judgment. We didn't want to alert anybody that we were doing a Hellraiser movie because we just wanted to keep it really quiet. The working title was always going to be Judgment, and Pinhead was never in the listings or anything else. But people were doing the assessor's reading, and the first line from the assessor was, "Come inside, we have such sights to show you." And he'd spotted it. So he was kind of like smiling on the thing and holding his Pinhead going, "I know what this is, I know what this is." And I liked what he did as the assessor. He was good, and I liked his physicality. He had a good look, and he had the right bone structure and a face, and I was like, that's a good face for a Pinhead. And I liked his English accent. He's not American, and he did a pretty good English accent. Whereas the other ones, a lot of the ones we heard were very Mary Poppins. And then I saw Paul, and I was like, that guy looks really, really good. Let's get him to read for Pinhead. So he read for Pinhead, and I was like, that's that guy. I said, "How tall is he?" And they were like, "He's this tall. How heavy is he?" I was like, yeah. I said, that's him. Fly him to LA and let's get a live cast on him. And I mean, he came out and he was just so happy. You know what I mean? You cannot imagine how happy he was. I mean, he was just like a big grinning. My biggest concern was how am I going to stop him smiling? You know what I mean? Like, he was just happy, really, really thrilled to be on board and wanted to play it. And that's what I wanted. I want somebody who's enthusiastic. And we started casting everyone else, and Dimension were all over everybody. They wanted to know, they wanted to see all the casting tapes. We settled on a couple of people, and they were like, no, we think we can get better. And they were chasing down everybody, and they wanted to see Pinhead do a test and everything else. And all the time, I would just not mention the Auditor. Eventually, Mike Leahy, we were getting very close to production. I'd already sculpted the makeup on me. I'd already sculpted it, I'd already ran the pieces, I'd already painted them, I'd got the costume, and we were getting closer and closer, and eventually Mike Leahy, the producer, said, whoa, hold on a second, we've cast all these people, we're getting there, we haven't even talked about this, who do you want for the Auditor? And I just said, I'm going to play it. And he looked at me and he went, okay.
I gotta say, because Andre can attest to this, when I realized you played the Auditor, I was like, holy shit, that's my favorite character in the movie.
It's very kind of you. Well, here's the deal. Let's just get into the reasons why. And I'm sure I've already seen that people have posted online, like seem to be offended. I mean, people love to hate on stuff anyway. I mean, initially I wasn't even going to take a credit at the end of the film. I was just you would never know who played the Auditor. And then we would just kind of let the information slide out there. But everybody who saw the film was like, you know, because the editors were very kind, because they had no idea. The editors didn't know. They were like, that's you, like, you know, like, you're really good. And they're like, you have to have a credit at the end. But I just kept it off IMDb, and there was a lot of people thinking maybe it was me, but they didn't know for sure. But I've since that some people get their panties in a bunch and, like, you know, he wrote it and directed and he plays the Auditor, like, how dare he? And it's like, well, I did start as an actor, you know, and I have acted before. But it came down to two things. One was I wanted to play it, without a doubt. I wanted to play that character. I knew how it should be played. I thought I knew how it should be played. And I thought I could do a pretty good job. And I wanted to play it, which is not an easy thing to do. Trust me, it's incredibly difficult to be in a makeup and directing and, you know, trying to direct a film and also play a character. It's not easy.
There is another director who did the same thing as you did pretty recently.
Oh, really?
And with great success, I might add. Korg. Taika Waititi, Thor Ragnarok, same thing.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
It worked there and it worked here.
Well, you know, I mean, yeah, it's like, you know, again, it can seem like power craziness, but apart from the reason that I wanted to do it and thought I could do a good job for the character, was the other thing is you have to take into the consideration the practicalities, which is that when you've got very little money and you can't cast ahead of time, you can't cast actors months in advance and then do their prosthetics and everything else and get wardrobe and all that kind of stuff. And I only had 2 makeup effects artists on set, you know, in Oklahoma. So what this meant I could do was, on days with the Auditor and the other characters, I would come in 2 hours ahead of everyone else, you know, for free with my makeup artist, Mike Meismer and my guys, put on my Auditor makeup, finish it, and then I could go to set and start directing, and Pinhead would arrive at call and the other characters, and then the makeup artist could start working on them, and then I could come out and help. So there are pictures of me in makeup helping doing makeups, and they're not staged. I'm genuinely gluing and painting makeups dressed as the Auditor. And then we could go on set and I could basically shoot, and then I could also do shorthand directing. You know, sometimes as a director you get a bit frustrated because if you want an actor to change a line reading, you have to kind of go, so that was great, but if you could say a bit more like this, you know, and okay, go and action, okay, cut, okay, now if you could maybe be a bit more, you know, lighter. So you have to go through the whole process. Whereas me, when I'm filming me doing the Auditor, if I was doing a line like, let's just dive in, shall we? It would literally be like, okay, roll on me, roll camera, and ready. Let's just dive in, shall we? Let's just dive in, shall we? Let's just dive in, shall we?
So let's just dive in, shall we?
I do 5-6 versions, one after another, and then I go, right, roll camera, I'm going to look over here, I'm typing, okay, I'm going to look down, I'm going to look up, look over here, okay, sniff, wipe my nose, okay, is that all good? Okay, moving on. And I would basically shoot all of my stock footage, you know what I mean, on myself, and I didn't have to give notes, I could just bang it out. because I was all about getting coverage. And then I knew
all the second unit stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and then I could come in on weekends and I could double for myself to do all the hands and the close-ups and all that kind of stuff. It just allowed for a very, it allowed me to do effectsy stuff, but without having to have an actor in makeup, you know. And then obviously it was difficult directing yourself because you have to kind of trust in everyone's opinions and everything else. But I felt it was a character that I knew, and I knew what I wanted it to sound like. And whenever we cast anybody, and I'm sure I could have directed them if I'd have needed to, but I found everyone's performance was very big and very over the top. A lot of people, when they've never worn prosthetics, they tend to do performances that are a little bit too big. And what I've learned over the years with prosthetics is you have to do so little. And it's almost because it becomes so little, it becomes more powerful. You know, there's scenes with the shots where, you know, pushing in on the auditor and just moving your head a little bit and dropping your mouth open transmits a huge amount of information. You know, when the cleaners are doing that first thing and you're on the auditor, and I'd written, you know, we just push in on those big black soulless eyes. And that's why he wears glasses, really, is because I just think they look soulless, like a shark. And in the words of Mike Jitlov, who directed Wizard of Speed and Time, when he's in all these films, someone said, "Why are you in your films?" He said, "Because I'm cheap and I'm always available." And that was reality as well. You know, it's like, again, whatever I can do. That's why Mike Regan plays the Chatterer, and you know, that's why the Assessor. That's why I played the Assessor. And Mike Leahy, bless his heart, stood by me. The nicest thing I can tell you about the whole thing is that when we finished the film and it was finished, and I got a phone call one day from Bob Weinstein, which blew me away. Bob has never called me, but he called me months later and he just said, "I love this film. I really love it." And I was like, "You do?" And he's like, "It's great." And da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, "Yeah, you should have let me direct a Hellraiser film years ago, right?" And he's like, "Ha, fuck you, kid." And then I was like, "What?" And I was like, he's like, yeah, fuck you. And I was like, "Yeah, really, you know." And I was like, "Let me ask you a question." He's like, "Sure." I said, "What did you think with the guy with the cuts on his face?" And he said, "That guy's fucking awesome. Who is that guy?" And I went, "It's me, Bob." And he went, "What?" And he went, it was like this. He went, hold on. "You know the guy with the cuts on his face? That's fucking Tunnicliffe." You know? He's like, "I love that guy. I could listen to him all day."
He's like the perfect Bib Fortuna to Jabba the Hutt. It seems like a character that always has been there and always should have been there. That scene, just when you go to talk to Pinhead, I loved that whole dynamic from the start. I just loved it. I'm sorry, I had to gush a little bit.
It. I love playing him because he's like, he's the master of his own little world, but he's subservient to Pinhead. But he's cleverer than Pinhead in some ways because he's figured out the hierarchy. So he's literally just moving through the pillars. You know what I mean? My favourite stuff of that is when Pinhead's tearing the angel apart, and it's just the look on his face of like, "Wow, really? We're going to do that, are we? Okie dokie." You know, he's clearly a bit like, "Ooh, I don't know if I'd have gone there," you know. And originally, he said at the very end, he says, "Naughty." He's like off camera, he says, "Naughty. Probably shouldn't have done that," you know. And I mean, I always thought he's a bit cheeky, but he's kind of like,
right.
And it's like, hopefully it's a character that you watch and you go, "Yeah, I'd like to know more about him, and where's he come from?" And all I hoped is that people would watch it and they would like the character and then get to the end and go, "No, really? Like, that was the director as well? Like, how cool is that?" Not, "Oh, really? Like, seriously? Like, he puts himself in the fucking film?" And to anyone who says that, who's a wannabe actor, I'm like, well, fuck you. You know what? I put myself in the movie. Get over it. Heather Langencamp is the strangest story. And I feel sorry for people who buy this movie or rent it thinking Heather's the star of the film or something. And I apologise. It's really not my doing. Unfortunately, Amazon lists actors by... They have a star meter, I think. So the most famous actor will immediately jump to the head of the queue. Same with IMDb. It lists whoever's got the highest rank on that. It just lists them first. And it's extremely misleading. We were casting the film. As you know, there are not that many roles in it anyway. The only female roles are Edgerton, Jafeel, and I think the landlady, you know, and the wife of Damon.
Right. Yeah.
Very small amount of roles.
And the jury. Don't forget about the jury.
Oh yes, the jury.
But I couldn't put. I knew that, you know. I mean, or the cleaners and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
Clearly, Heather, get your kit off and start licking this guy. You know, it wasn't going to happen. But Chris Freihofer, the casting guy, came to me one day and said, "How would you feel about Heather Langencamp in the film?" And I said, What are you talking about? Nancy from, you know? And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, "Well, look, I know Heather. He said, she's a friend of mine. He said, and she lives in Oklahoma. You know, her family's from Oklahoma. She lives in LA. And I said, I know she lives in LA. She's married to Dave Anderson, who's a brilliant makeup effects artist.
Right.
I said, you know, and I said, yeah. He said, well, she's got family here and she's a friend of mine. He said, and we were talking. He said, and I told her what I was working on. And he said, I'm working on the most bizarre, strange, weird script I've ever read. And she said, well, I want to read it if it's that weird and that bizarre. He said she read it. He said, and she just loved it. She thought it was really, really bizarre and trippy and weird. And said, well, is there anything in it I could play? And he said, no. I said, I'd ask you. And I said, well, we don't really have anything, you know. And I said, we don't have any money. He said, oh, she doesn't, you know, the money's not important. She'll do it for, you know, scale, you know, whatever. I said, really? And he said, yeah. I said, well, the only thing I can think of is the landlady. You know, it's barely anything. I mean, it was originally more than what's in the film. You know, there was a little bit more dialogue, but it's a small thing. And I said, if she wants to come and do it, I said, we can grunge her up and make her look really hideous. He said, no, she wants to kind of to go character. You know, she'd like prosthetics maybe and a nose. And I said, well, we can't really afford that. But I said, well, maybe her husband can come and do it for her, you know, that gets
right
in it, you know. And he's like, well, let me talk to her. And he came back and he was just like smiling and said, Heather wants to be in it. And I was like, that's brilliant, you know, like how cool is that? And so I'm at the hotel one night. I get back from the hotel from shooting and there's Heather, all smiles, and I'm like, hey, it's nice to meet you. And she's like, I just thought this was the weirdest, freakiest script I'd ever read, you know. She said, I thought it was really cool. She said, and you know, I know we know people who know people, but you know, and I was like, it's great. I said, well, look, I just want you to be an actor in the film. I said, we're not going to call you Nancy and have a badge with Nancy written on it. You know, we're not going to give you a fucking red and green apron to wear. You know, I said that would just be cheesy. You're not going to work in a boiler room. I said it would just pull everyone out of the role and move. It's almost like in my mind, I didn't want to give her a credit. You know, it's like in a perfect world, and probably we shouldn't have given her a credit, but that's all it was. And she came in and she got her makeup, and we went, and Adrian Lynn did her makeup and went to town and made her teeth look horrible and wrinkled her up. And I mean, I know that some people online have actually said, whoa, Heather Langencamp's looking a bit rough.
Well, I got to say, in retrospect, though, it probably did give the film a lot more attention earlier on than it probably would have otherwise.
It certainly did, because I mean, the problem, not in a good way, was because you know, we were shooting. And right. Then, and I wasn't really, I don't have a phone on set. I don't let anyone have a phone on set. I tell everyone to keep their phones on. They're not allowed to use their phones on set, except the makeup artist. So we were shooting, and I came off set, and I got in a car with the producer to go back to the hotel. And Mike Leahy, this producer, said, I think you want to turn your phone on. So I'm going to warn you, your phone might blow up. And I said, why? And he said, Heather Langencamp did an interview, and she said she's working on Hellraiser. And I went, oh, no. And he went, yeah, it's bad. She didn't give away plot details. She just said, oh, I'm doing a Hellraiser film. He said, it's bad. And I turned on my phone, and instantly there were links to Doug Bradley. Because obviously, as soon as anyone heard, the first thing that all the press did was reach out to Doug Bradley to say, why aren't you in Hellraiser, dude? And thus started the problems, because he said what he said. And I thought, you know what, this is ridiculous. And I thought, I'm not going to get involved in he said this and I said that and he said the other and I said everything else. I said, there's so much kind of like hear one thing and think they said this and don't remember exactly what they said. And I said, I'm going to cut all this straight. I'm going to go straight to the kill on this. I'm going to take the little piece of what he wrote to me in the email, that little one line, and put it online and just say to everyone, hey, look, before you start accusing me of anything, we asked him to sign an NDA agreement. He wouldn't sign it. And here's what he wrote to me. You know, and I released the piece in speech marks. I'm not going to sign an NDA and make myself liable for $1 million brackets, which I don't have, just to read a damn script. End speech marks. And I released that as a quote saying, hey, you know, if you want to know what I think, I'm very upset Doug's not in it. I asked him to be in it. He wouldn't sign an NDA. And here's what he said when we asked him to sign an NDA. End of story. And the next thing I know, Doug Bradley is texting me, furious. How dare you? How dare you release private emails between you and I? You have soured our friendship. He was livid. I mean, and I was like, what?
I can understand to a point, yeah. But
well,
yeah.
I can to a point. I mean, my take on it is this, is I mean, look, me and Doug have spoke over the years on emails. You know, I've got millions of emails from Doug's, millions of stuff that's very, very, private about relationships and divorces and God knows what, and all sorts of stuff that I would never dream of releasing. But when he kind of said to me, "How dare you release private email?" I was like, "Fucking hell, mate!" It's like, hang on a second, I haven't released, anything rude or inappropriate. But what I have done, I suspect, is release a piece of information or a direct quote, which means that you can't wriggle out of it in some way and cast the blame somewhere else. This clearly says what your mindset was, and anyone who read it is going to know what you thought. And if everyone thought you were a lovely fluffy bunny rabbit, which I'm sure you want them to all think, they're all going to look at it and go, "Oh, that's a bit dickish, isn't it?" And that's what you don't like. That's why you're upset. That's why you're offended, is because people are going to see the true colour of this. And I'm not going to stand here and say I've done anything wrong. I wanted you to be in it. We wanted to offer you a decent amount of money. You were miserable from the start about it. And then you made a comment about my damn script. Now, why would I want you in my film if you're going to be mean, and like not complimentary? It's like, I'm sorry, but... And then he came afterwards and said, clearly Gary didn't want to be in it. He didn't fight for me very hard. I fought for you from the very beginning, my friend. You didn't fight for me. It's not like, we got on and you were like, let me think about it. You were like, if you'd wrote back and said, you know what, fuck it, I'll sign the NDA and read it. You were just belligerent from the beginning. And when I showed everybody in the world, you're slightly belligerent. And I didn't send the whole thing. I just sent that one line. It was where people suddenly got to see the other side of the coin, and it reacted badly towards him, and that's why he got upset.
He could have just said, he could have just blamed it on the people at the execs at Dimension and left you out of it. That's true, but I get where you're coming from. Yeah. As
soon as Heather came out and said that she was on the film, Doug was out like fire, releasing his statement of what had happened. It was like... And he was like, I was protecting you and I didn't say anything and I haven't mentioned anything about it, but clearly Heather Langencamp didn't sign an NDA or hasn't agreed to it, so why should I? And he released his statement because he likes a bit of, he wanted someone, sure that it was nice having people ring up, and he wanted to give his statement and explain what was going on. And since then, he's been nothing but down on the whole thing, you know what I mean? I'll be honest with you, I emailed Doug 2 weeks ago. I emailed him 2 weeks ago and I wrote and said, Doug, My subject header was Olive Branch, and I wrote to Doug and I said, hey, Doug, before this thing is released and before I do the plethora of interviews, which I will do, wouldn't it be great if we could reconcile this thing? I said, I didn't speak to my father for 4 years for way worse shit than we've talked about. We have got such great memories that I hold dearly. Can't we figure this out? And I never heard anything back.
Well, that's regrettable.
And I just think, personally, Doug would be serving himself a lot better, and the fans, if he was to go, you know what, I think Paul Taylor does a great job. Fantastic. Good luck to them. Great to see Hellraiser doing well. Wouldn't do him any harm. Gary, my friend, did a great job on the film, and congratulations, Gary, something like that, you know what I mean? But he won't. Because he's surrounded by a bunch of little people who are like, it's not very good, is it? You know what I mean? Like, they'll be the ones sending him all the bad reviews, saying how bad Paul is. No one's going to send him the good ones. And, and no fan, nobody who's written anything nice about Paul Taylor, which, as you've seen, there are a lot of people who have said very nice things about Paul. But no one's going to walk up to Doug Bradley at the next Comic-Con and say, hello, Mr. Bradley, I just saw Judgment. Paul Taylor's not half bad,
No, but I would walk up to him and say, I wish you would have done it, because it would have been a great comeback for the character, and it would have been great to see him again. But yeah.
Are you kidding? Trust me, you're preaching to the choir. There is nobody who is a bigger cheerleader of Doug and that character than me. I wanted him to be in it. I wanted him to be in it. I wanted that guy, and it would have been the right move for him, and it would have been fantastic, and it would have been...
Paul does a serviceable job, but yeah, it's unfortunate.
It's not Doug. And if Doug's listening to this, I'll be like, Doug, I wanted you to be in it. I've got nothing but the greatest respect for you, for the character, as an actor. I don't understand how this all became so embittered and got so out of hand, and why now it feels like pistols at dawn, because it seems to have just jumped to another echelon now of nastiness and vindictiveness. And in this letter I wrote to him, I was like, look, are we going to be sitting at conventions giving each other the middle finger, I don't want to be in that position. We have such great memories. But if you're going to draw daggers on me, I'll draw daggers back, It's like, but I really don't want to do that. I don't. And my wife's, bless her, she's like, please don't start a fight. Because I have a tendency to escalate to the next degree. And I don't want to do that. But I'm sure Doug's going to be like, oh, well, obviously he's playing the Auditor. And, clearly, he wants to do that. But look, some people you can never win over. It's like watching some of the reviewers. Some people have got it hard and fast in their mind that they're not going to enjoy the film and they don't want to enjoy it. And it's going to be a piece of rubbish. And that's fine. Look, I can't please everybody. But it seems to me that it's been quite nice to watch people have a positive reaction. The nicest reaction is to see people go from, oh, this is going to be utter rubbish, to, and I'm seeing a lot of this, to the, you know what? I think I kind of enjoyed that.
If you like this video, then please hit that subscribe button. Due to recent changes made by YouTube, we also encourage all of our subscribers, both new and old, to please hit that bell icon next to the subscribe button as well, so you will be notified when new videos are uploaded. Be sure to check back for news and analysis of the happenings and corporate politics behind the scenes of your favorite genre movies, as well as explorations of your favorite characters and their backgrounds and context here at Midnight's Edge.